All right, well, today is the final day of the Senate inquiry into the rejection of Qatar Airways flights into Australia. New Qantas CEO Vanessa Hudson will be grilled again while Alan Joyce remains overseas, unable to front the inquiry due to personal obligations. We're joined now by Australian Qatar Business Council Chairman Simon Harrison. Simon, thanks so much for your time this morning. Now, Vanessa Hudson claims that she and her colleagues at Qantas didn't know about this decision with Qatar. Do you buy it?
I don't see how she couldn't have known about this decision with Qatar. They've been in discussions with the government for quite some time now.
Well, she says it was her predecessor, Alan Joyce, who was in those discussions. But what we did hear yesterday for the first time was that those discussions were had. It was confirmed.
I think, yeah, that's the case. I think what concerns me about this is that Alan Joyce could have quite easily filed a statement setting out a lot of these issues at the very start of this inquiry. He didn't need to physically attend. The importance of that is it would have helped those of us who did give evidence frame our answers a little bit more efficiently and certainly have assisted the committee going forward.
How annoyed are you about this decision? I mean, at the end of the day, this is costing your airline and Australians here.
It's extremely annoying, frustrating. It's disappointing. I think what we have here is that the minister had conflated effectively what were alleged criminal abuses by certain individuals to human rights for the nation of Qatar, and then equated that with a commercial decision between two sovereign nations. Now, she's boxed Australia into a corner here and set a precedent. So, for example, Qantas have a co-share agreement and had a co-share agreement for the past 18 years with China Eastern. Does that mean if China Eastern are now going to apply for additional routes, that human rights have to be taken into account? If so, that's going to be a very interesting discussion. Qatar has invested something in the region of $6 billion into the Australian economy over the past few years. They're our largest, third largest, trading partner across the Middle East and North Africa. We have 3,000 Australians making a living in Qatar. 50,000 Australians fly to Qatar every year, and 26 of our universities have co-venture agreements with Qatar. Discussions that I have almost daily with Qatar and with Australian industry is about attracting investment and business into regional Australia, and this puts a lot of that at risk, and really for no reason. I think what is also concerning is that under the radar, we now find out that Austrade is closing its Qatar office permanently in Qatar.
All right, let's call a spade here. Is this a sweetheart deal between Qantas and the government, the federal government here in Australia?
I wouldn't know. I can only surmise that looking at the evidence that's come forward, there's a high probability that that is the case.
So you think this is a sweetheart deal? That these two are in each other's pockets?
It's showing everything along those lines at the moment, yes.
That's pretty alarming.
It's very concerning. I mean, what was also concerning and came through the committee yesterday was that Qantas apparently have been lobbying the government to stop the ACCC having further auditory investigatory powers in respect of the aviation industry, and one's got to ask why.
Simon, what you've just said is likely the case here is a huge statement. I mean, it makes us question every relationship the government has with corporates in this country.
And that's a problem, but it also now equates sovereign national decisions that bring money into the Australian exchequer and go to mum and dad families and small businesses across Australia, to linking corporate decisions with human rights issues. Now, we can argue day in, day out as to how Qatar has been proceeding with the help of Fair Trade Australia and others around its industrial strategies and a whole range of things. But this really does mean that the likes of China and others with very poor human rights records have to have that taken into account when it comes to the Australian government negotiating contracts going forward. And as I say, that's exactly where this naive and ridiculous comment by linking those individual actions to the state of Qatar leaves us, unfortunately.
I mean, there are those allegations still being investigated, so we do have to respect that. But surely that's not enough for a decision to be based on. And as we know, the government has tried to blame several things here.
Well, look, I over the years, my back catalogue is of suing churches and suing schools for historic child abuse. Churches and schools as an institution always take the line that they can't be responsible for the independent criminal actions of employees. That's changed slightly in the past year or so through the High Court. But if that benchmark applies, then the likes of Qatar Airways, my humble experience, they're going to find it difficult to attach liability to Qatar Airways for those independent acts of alleged assault.
Just very quickly, Simon, we know that there is likely to be more representations here between the government and Qantas going forward. Are you hopeful of a reversal of this decision for Qatar?
I'm always hopeful, but also I think in the meantime we need at least an apology from the Minister to retract that contextual issue. By raising that as the only context, she's actually elevated it to the main context of the decision. That's been taken very badly, not just in Qatar, but across the wider Middle East. It's completely insensitive, it's erroneous, irrational, and extremely naive.
All right, big statements there, Simon. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, Carlos.
Thank you, pleasure.
Big statements. That was an absolute takedown. Wow.
OK, well, this is a story we've been following for weeks now. Our viewers alarmed by the cost of international travel, outraged to hear that the government was blocking extra flights from Qatar Airways, which could increase competition and bring down ticket prices.
A Senate inquiry is trying to figure out why these flights were blocked, with Qantas executives being grilled this week. Well, we just spoke to the chairman of the Australian Qatar Business Council, and he's pretty sus on the relationship between our government and Qantas.
Looking at the evidence that's come forward, there's a high probability that that is the case.
So you think this is a sweetheart deal? That these two are in each other's pockets?
It's showing everything along those lines at the moment, yes.
That's pretty alarming.
It's very concerning. I mean, what was also concerning and came through the committee yesterday was that Qantas apparently have been lobbying the government to stop the ACCC having further auditory investigatory powers in respect of the aviation industry, and one's got to ask why.
Lots of questions there. Let's bring in Treasurer Jim Chalmers from Bundaberg. Jim, thanks for your time. That was quite a takedown.
Oh, good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Carl, from beautiful Bundaberg in regional Queensland. Look, obviously, I don't agree with those comments that you just played. That's the first time I've heard them, but I don't agree with them. Particularly when it comes to that ACCC point, when that monitoring was set up in, I think, the middle of 2020, it was set up to expire by the former government. It was set up to expire in June of this year, and that's what's happened. We've got ongoing monitoring by the Transport Bureau and publishing of this kind of information, which is important. And we've got a whole bunch of processes about aviation, green paper, white paper, not being excluded from the competition review, all of these sorts of things which show that we are serious about competition in the aviation sector.
It looks to me like after seeing that interview this morning, you guys are saying nothing to see here, when in fact you guys are up to your eyeballs in this and you don't know how to get out.
Oh, that's not right either, Carl. I mean, governments of both political persuasions make decisions like this one from time to time. You and I and Sarah and I have talked about this on other occasions.
Not sweetheart deals,
all
though.
of the considerations and try and...
Not sweetheart deals.
Well, obviously don't agree with you, Carl, that that's what's happened here. What's happened here is a decision taken in the usual way. Our predecessors took a similar decision. We've taken a decision like this. Capacity is actually expanding in our aviation sector. That's a good thing. We're getting lots of tourists and that's helping the economy. I obviously don't share the description that you just repeated from that interview earlier on.
But I guess, Treasurer, the issue is whether this washes with the public. I mean, we heard in the inquiry yesterday Qantas confirming that it did make representations to the federal government off the back of the pandemic recovery about, you know, cancelling out any kind of competition. They're not going to commit to actually re-engaging with that to open it back up to other markets. It's all about competition and it's all about the consumer losing here.
Well, obviously it's about the consumer and obviously we want a competitive aviation system. That's why we're expanding capacity in both international and a domestic sense as well. It's why we've got this work that Catherine King's leading on the future of aviation, and competition is central to that. And competition is how we get prices down. But it's not unusual, as I said before, for governments of either political persuasion, frankly, to get these bids from time to time and to make decisions on them, the best decisions that they can, weighing up all of the available...
OK, well, just in relation to that interview as well that we heard earlier this morning, it was mentioned that your government was closing the Austrade office in Qatar. Is that true?
Sounds like we've lost audio there with the Treasurer.
Yeah, we've lost it. We will try and come back to it. And there's a number of questions that we're hoping that the government can answer. At this point, they still haven't explained themselves over the Qatar decision in an adequate fashion, the inquiry will continue today. So, look, we'll hopefully get the Treasurer back to talk about fuel prices, inflation. The RBA's got some big decisions to make as well, so we'll try and come back to them as soon as we can.
All right. Hey there, Today fans. Sarah and...
What's my name again?
Oh my God, Carl.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel, though. Subscribe now for more news, special reports and amazing Aussie stories.
And Carl misbehaving,
Whoa,
of course.
That never happens.
Always happens.
What's she talking about?